everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host. I'm a journalist based out in Reykjavik, Iceland. And if you follow me on Twitter, you might have noticed that before I started recording today, I posted a status about how there is a huge windstorm here in Iceland, tearing at the house, absolutely crazy. There's been snow, it's freezing outside. I was waiting until night time to record when it's quiet and the traffic has calmed down, but as night fell, the windstorm came. And so I've tried to do the best I can, but if you can hear my roof rattling in the background, sorry about that. Other than that, it's been kind of a quiet week out here. It's that time of the year for staying home, as we have been doing all year, but even more so now because it's just disgusting outside. Playing games, cooking soup, baking bread, taking care of the house, taking care of ourselves. The winter season is here. But I've been playing an absolute ton of games this week. I've been playing Hades, still, like crazy, on a daily basis. I'm still working my way through it. Turns out that after the main game is the main narrative is sealed, there is loads more to do, and it just keeps you playing and playing and playing. So I'll be talking about that a little bit at the end of the show because I'm way past spoiler break territory on Hades. I'd like to share with you how that has gone. I also tried a few other games. I picked up a little bit of Doom 2016. I picked up a little bit of Soma. But most of all, I've been playing Pyre. Because after Hades, I was so addicted to Hades, I was thinking, what can I play next that's going to measure up to that great game? And so I decided to go with Supergiant. I stuck with Supergiant. Pyre is the third game that they made. After Bastion and Transistor, there was Pyre. And Pyre is only available on PlayStation and on Steam for Windows, Mac and Linux, so it never came to Switch. It's a 2017 title. And it got some love at the time when it came out, but it wasn't hitting home runs on the year-end lists or anything like that. And so while it did get a lot of respect and it is a well-known game, it is something of the black sheep of the Supergiant catalogue. But I played it and I've been having a wonderful time with it. I finished it now. I played a little bit more before this recording just to remind myself of the beginning. Sometimes when you finish a game and you've come through the whole cycle and you're about to come and talk about it on a podcast like this, I think it's really cool to go back and play the opening moments again just to remind you where it all began. And so I did that today again, and it was really fun to revisit the beginning after that saga of a game. But before I get into the nitty-gritty of Pyre, I will mention that this show has a Patreon. So if you are interested in supporting the show, if you enjoy it, if you're a regular listener, or if you're a first-time listener who enjoys this episode, you can go to patreon.com/gaminginthewild, and for as little as $1 a month, you can sign up to be a member. You'll get posts from me on a weekly basis about all the cool games that are on sale for PlayStation and Switch. You'll get member-exclusive posts, member-exclusive episodes, and an invitation to the show's Discord server where you can chat with me and chat with all of the other Patreons. There's a really cozy little community going on in the Gaming in the Wild Discord. If you'd like to come and join the gang, it's patreon.com/gaminginthewild, and I really appreciate everyone who does that. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's dive right in and talk about Pyre. So Supergiant are known for being a creative studio. They bring a lot of artistry to the games that they make. Bastion was very visually and musically creative. It's a really cool artistic game. It really fits the bill for this show. But I mean, I quite liked Bastion. Transistor really hit it out of the park for me. It was a kind of a slick, sort of sensual sci-fi RPG. And Bastion, Transistor and Hades They all share some elements. They are all isometric action games with RPG elements, with combat elements. But Pyre is something completely different. It is unlike the other Supergiant games. It's the most far out they've gone. It is quite an eccentric game. I haven't played anything quite like it. Rather than being action-based isometric, it is a visual novel with some soft sort of RPG elements and interspersed by bouts of arena combat sports. And that is something to get your head around, and it's just the tip of the iceberg of the weirdness of this game. I will start out by saying this is quite a hard game to talk about. There are so many elements, there are so many threads of plot, gameplay, audiovisual, script, lore. It's a complicated game, and I've listened to a couple of other reviews of the game, and people have kind of struggled to articulate, quite understandably, exactly what Pyre is. So I'm really going to do my best for you. I've got a bunch of notes here, and I'm going to try and break it down for you. But I will start by giving you the opening moments of the game. So in Pyre, you begin when you are found, your character is found. You're looking down at a view of a long desert valley, and your character is found lying in a river. A wagon rolls through the landscape. It pulls up next to you. People get out, they come over, and suddenly your character hears voices. 3 masked figures approach. And those 3 people are the characters that will form the basis of the little family that you're going to become a part of as you play this game. They explain to you that you're in the downside, which is a purgatorial wilderness, below a nation called the Commonwealth. People are cast down from the Commonwealth to the downside for reasons that become apparent later. And as these 3 figures pull you back from death's door, basically, they take off their masks, they introduce themselves to you, they bring you into the wagon. They kind of try and decide whether to leave you or take you, but one in particular says, no, this person's coming with us. They don't give you a gender. I think it started off by one of the characters saying, should we take her with us? And then there was a moment where the game says, this person has assumed you're female, and you have an option to change your gender to male, female, or agender, which is a really nice little touch. I picked agender, and they just refer to you by neutral pronouns. And you're taken into the back of the black wagon, and the 3 characters take off their masks and they talk to you. They say that they're looking for a reader. Can you read? And so you have to make a choice about admitting whether or not you can read. Of course you can, so it turns out that you're a reader. It turns out that readers are rare, because up in the Commonwealth, reading is banned. But down here in the downside, there is a rumoured way for exiles to get back up to the Commonwealth through a mysterious rite. And to take part in the rite, this troop of people, this triumvirate, needs a reader. And I'll leave the plot there for now and talk about the game, and we'll come back to what this all means a little later on. The game is divided into 2 sections. There is the visual novel section, which is just an absolutely beautiful thing to look at and to listen to. Every character that you talk to appears on the screen as kind of a card with a really, really beautifully illustrated portrait of them, and they talk to you against a backdrop, usually the inside of the black wagon, sometimes locations that the wagon stops at for the night or something. But the artwork on this game is stunning. For a start, because of the colour palette, it's so brightly coloured. You know, so many post-apocalyptic games, or games that are set in some kind of wilderness or purgatory or wasteland. You know, the Fallouts of this world and the Mad Maxes of this world, all these kind of games, the Wastelands of this game, Borderlands of this world. They're quite dour. They're grey and brown and green, and there's crumbling stuff everywhere. In Pyre, the wilderness of the downside is a technicolor place. There are neon colours. The ground in the different biomes that you'll travel through is bright orange, bright red, bright blue, bright green. It's eye-poppingly appealing. And And combined with the sound of the game, which is another beautiful soundtrack by Darren Korb, and the audio design of the game, like all of the characters are voiced, but they speak in a foreign language. And it's a beautiful sound to listen to, this foreign language that you're hearing as you read in English. So between music and illustration, the character designs, the landscape designs, it's just stunning. And that really does help to carry the game along. Not least because the visual novel side of things, it's not intensely interactive. If you've played visual novels, you'll know the deal. It's mostly dialogue based. There's a lot of reading, there's a lot of choices, dialogue choices, plot choices. You choose like courses of action for the group and things like that. So the visual novel side of things is quite gameplay light, but because of the beautiful presentation of the game, it's really enjoyable. And as you travel around from place to place, your journey is interspersed by bouts of the rights. And the rights are presented as a sports game. So you'll come to a place under some stars, you choose from constellations which one you want to go to, and then the rights occur beneath some stars that have come into alignment. You come to an arena and you face off against a different triumvirate. And there are lots of different triumvirates that you'll come up against in different parts of the downside. And what you have to do is play a 3-on-3 game against them. Each team has a pyre, which is like a flaming torch at their end of the pitch. The pitches are based on the landscape, so if you're in a deep forest, they'll have thorny obstacles, or if you're in a desert, there'll be cracks in the ground. And what you have to do is pass the ball between your players, only one of which can move at a time, and the one that's holding the ball, or the one that you are controlling. And you have to take the ball, dunk it into the opposition pyre, and when their pyre goes from 100 down to 0, then you've won the game. Or if they extinguish your pyre down to 0, then they have won the game. After a few different rounds of this game, you'll reach a kind of a climactic match, and that's the end of one cycle of the game. So as you can probably tell, this is a kind of a non-standard gameplay style, a cross between visual novel, sports games, and then based on the outcomes, whether you win or lose, the game just rolls on. You'll get experience points, you'll add players to your caravan, so you have different members with different skills that you can draw on, from big, bulky, slow defensive players to small, fast players. And in the visual novel side of the game, you'll get to meet them, talk to them, absorb their character and the way they look, the way they are, different species of player, different kind of magical beings, really, really high fantasy visual novel, and then you get to control them on the field. So that's the two sides of the gameplay and the presentation of Pyre. Really unusual, really striking. So off you go on a journey around the downside with your crew to carry out the rites on a road trip. And it just works. It's such a strange game. There's nothing quite like it, but it just works. And I think one of the reasons that this game works as well as it does is attention to detail. So the black wagon, which travels around the downside as your vehicle, at first you don't have any control over it really. You don't get to drive it around. It just kind of, you decide where to go and you watch animations of the black wagon trundling across this fantastical, colourful, neon, luminous landscape. And kind of conversation happens as you go. You can kind of, once you get to a destination, you close in on the arena that you're going to play at, and you can choose between two routes. And one route will buff one character, one route will buff another. And pretty soon you'll get favourites. Like my early favourite character was called Faye. She was a moon-touched vagabond girl who just kind of is a stowaway. And I really liked her. She's like a very spaced out, lost orphan who has these kind of visions. She seems to be very in touch with the mythology, the religion that the rites is based on, the words of the 8 scribes. There's a lot of lore in this game. But Faye was just so cool and fun. I really liked her kind of spaced out, personality. Sometimes you'll find her in the Black Wagon, and she's just kind of seems to be engaged in a dialogue with these the 8 scribes, the people that wrote the rights and designed this whole game. And she's in dialogue with them. And so I was always coming down on the side of Faye. So if there are 2 routes to the arena, and one of them says, if you take the high road through the Crystal Cliffs, Faye would like to visit a statue of one of the scribes, and you'll know that Faye will get a buff for the next match. Whereas another one of the characters is called Jodariel. She's a human that has been down in the downside for so long that she's become demonic in form. Like, the longer that you're in the downside, the more it gets to you and transforms you. And so if you go another route, like down by the lake, then Jodariel wants to go and look for some kind of food stuff or some equipment that she thinks she can find, and you'll know that Jodariel will get a buff for the next game. So you have some kind of bearing on the way that the game unfolds, different locations that you might find, different characters that you can focus on, and that's really fun. Like, for the visual novel side of it, I never felt like there wasn't enough for me to do. There's always something to click on. Inside the Black Wagon, it's a very dusty, dark space with loads of cool-looking magical stuff hanging everywhere. There are these drive imps that drive the wagon, and they kind of hide in the rafters, and if you click on them, they'll kind of squeak and look down at you. And the book that contains the rights is really beautiful. You can pick it up at any time and leaf through the pages, and new pages will appear to you the more accomplished that your triumvirate becomes, and the more games that you win, the more that you progress through the game. So the lore unfolds in a really gradual way. I will say that there is so much lore in this game. There is the Commonwealth, the land above, the downside with all of its denizens and all of its history. There is an empire that came before all of this, and then there is the tale of the 8 scribes, the founders of the Commonwealth. And there is so much lore swirling around, mixed with all of this kind of character information that you'll take in, that I found myself just kind of bathing in it all. I wasn't really internalizing it in a way that made a lot of sense to me. It was just like all of this kind of swirl of context and magic and history and lore, just creating this really cool atmosphere in the game. And mixed with that bright eye-popping style and that cool sound of the language and the amazing character designs, it felt like every time I was playing this game, I was kind of submerged in this world in a really unusual way. And so I was really looking forward to playing it. I played it for an hour a night for the first couple of nights. And that's not a lot for me. I will often binge a game for many hours. But with Pyre, I felt that there was so much to take in that I just had to stop. It was like overstimulation, visual and sonic. And the lore and story was so much to take in. I was like, I think I need a break. It's like a saturated game, a game world in many, many ways. And I really liked that about it. So for the first couple of nights, I played just a little bit. I played a few rounds of the game, rounds of the rights rather. And then I took a break, came back the next day. I was looking forward to it all day to get back into Pyre and to get back on the road again. And the game world just keeps building and building. Like, every time you face off against a different opposition triumvirate, an opposition team, they are so cool. They're all so different. They have really cool names like the Beyonders, the Chastity, the Dissidents, the Essence, the Fate, the Tempers, and the Withdrawn. They all occupy different areas of the map, and they're all different species. So your core crew is Headwin, a human who is still got human form. Jodariel, this demonic kind of elf-like warrior figure. Rookie Greentail, he's like a little dog called a cur. His race is called the Curs, and he has like a waxed moustache with curls on the ends of it. Then there was also the Harps, this winged species of warrior women like Valkyries. And then there are witches, there are bog witches. There is a race of kind of snake warriors that live in the ocean. And you'll meet all of these different teams from different races. They all have different stories and all of those different stories kind of intermingle as the teams face off against each other. So there is a huge cast that you'll get to know. And it is a real pleasure coming through this game world. It reminded me a little in atmosphere of the fantasy films of my childhood and my teens. Like, I was a huge fan of the film Labyrinth. And you remember in that film, there's like the goblins, the Goblin King, there is the little dog guy who kind of rides on a bigger dog, and then there is these kind of red, fiery fur creatures, and there are wizards, and the whole thing is just like a kind of a overwhelming, engaging, imaginative journey. And things like Willow too, and like the Dark Crystal, these kind of very, very vivid childhood memories of watching these high fantasy films. Pyre brings all of that atmosphere, and it's quite special. I think that it wouldn't be complete to talk about this game without talking about the shopkeeper as well. You know, every good fantasy game needs a shopkeeper, whether it's a beetle from Breath of the Wild or the menagerie of aliens that you'll meet in No Man's Sky. And Pyre has a really good one. It's this strange little creature called Falcon Ron, and he'll just kind of rock up. He's always coincidentally right next to where the rites are about to take place. And he's such a weird little fella. He's a little green creature. He runs a store with his dad. He's always talking to his dad, and his dad never presents himself. You're never exactly sure if he's a figment of Falcon Ron's imagination. And Falcon Ron will say hello, he'll tell you to look around, and then as you're looking at stuff, he just kind of makes noises. He does these little chuckles, and then he starts humming to the music. And honestly, like, whenever Falcon Ron, there was an opportunity to go and see him, I would just browse the shop for a bit, even if I'd had no money, just because I wanted to hear Falcon Ron being his weird little self. And there are so many times when I was playing this game when I just had the biggest smile on my face because this game world was so enjoyable. Honestly, like every couple minutes I would just break out into a beaming smile because this game is just such a pleasure to play. And I think at that point, we're now at the 22 minute mark. So I've talked you through the basics of what Pyre is, and I feel like to really get any further into what the game is about, I have to start getting into plot detail and spoilers. And I think this is a game that it's really good to come to fresh. If you like the sound of this strange fantasy world and this combination of visual novel and high fantasy and deep lore, it's a total loregasm. If that's your kind of game, then you'll really enjoy Pyre. But to talk about it anymore, to get into it any deeper, we have to go past the end of the first round of rites and to talk about the plot developments that come up, because there is kind of a hinge point halfway through the game where things open up a little bit. And it's really better for you to discover that for yourself. So if you're leaving here, then I will say thank you very much for listening. You can get Pyre on the PlayStation 4. You can get it on the Steam store. And also, if you're one of the millions of people who bought or were gifted the Itch bundle for racial justice that came out in support of Black Lives Matter earlier this year, then I have some good news for you. Pyre was in that bundle, unbelievably. I mean, everyone was talking about how A Short Hike and Night in the Woods and Oxenfree and these kind of games were in the bundle. But Pyre was in there too, and it just wasn't mentioned. It seems crazy to me now for there to be one of these 4 polished gem Supergiant Games in this bundle, and for it not to have been one of the stars of the show. So I played this on my Mac. I played with a wired DualShock controller. The game just knew the controller was there. I didn't have to do any setup or any key mapping or anything like that, so it was very, very easy. I played it on my MacBook. It looked beautiful on that screen. I just played it kind of propped up on my knees. I played it in bed or on the sofa, and I really enjoyed playing it that way. So it's in PlayStation 4, so if you want to play it on your TV. But if you have a laptop and you have the Black Lives Matter bundle, then you already own Pyre, so you can go and play it there. I will say that I have tried to play it once before, and I tried to play it with the keypad and keys, and it was impossible. Like, to play the sport part, the rights was really hard, and it does support mouse and key control. But when you play with a PlayStation pad or an Xbox pad or whatever you prefer, you get direct control over your triumvirate, so you can pass the ball much easier, and you really feel like you have much more control over them. And they're also different. I mean, you have these short, fast, running players that can just streak past the opposition. You can run in behind them and dunk it before they've even kind of known that you're there. But you'll score less with them. If you take one of your big, heavy players and you have to kind of be a little more tactical, you'll get more points for reaching the Pyre. You'll get almost double, in fact. So a couple of goals with your big defensive player will do you really well. And I didn't play an incredibly tactical game in Pyre. I played pretty much with one-player glory runs. So I was always selecting the most speedy players possible. Later in the game, you get access to different players that have different skill sets, and you can really kind of choose your play style. I've talked to people who played with Jodariel as their main player, and she's very slow, very big, very powerful. But I preferred the really small speedsters. I barely passed it. I just went for the ball with my short Rookie Greentail, the dog character, or with Faye, the fairy girl, and sprinted for the Pyre. And you get characters that can kind of jump over enemies and things like this. So there is some variety there. I will say that I didn't lose many matches. I think I lost just 2 on my whole playthrough. But there are modifiers that you can place on each match to make them harder if you want to, if you're finding it too easy. But I was enjoying just breezing through the game at a leisurely pace, winning most of my matches, losing a couple. And whether you win or lose, the plot develops based on that. So you can just kind of allow that loss to happen. There is no kind of fail state in this game. There is just a lot of progression that can happen. And I'm getting very close to spoiler territory now, so I'm going to head off and do the little spoiler break. Thanks for listening. If you're leaving now, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch as Gaming in the Wild. And if you enjoyed this episode, you're very welcome to join the Patreon community. That's patreon.com/gaminginthewild. And if you're hanging around, I'll be right back. So if you're still with me, I'm going to assume that you've played Pyre and you're here for the post-game look at the plot of the game, because I'm going to spoil it from now on. Last warning. So halfway through the game, after your first round of the landscape, when you've played lots of different teams, pretty much all of the different teams, your Black Wagon gets some extra abilities. It starts to be able to cross oceans, and eventually even to fly. And when it starts to fly, you can control it, so you finally can fly around the landscape. It's not like a vast exploration, but it does give like a little welcome extra bit of interactivity. It's nice to traverse the map on your own terms and to actually control the Black Wagon. But the first season of rights culminates with a liberation right, and this is the climactic match. And you have to nominate one player, and if you win, that player will be liberated back to the Commonwealth. But it turns out that there is more to this than meets the eye. It's not just about getting people back to take up their old lives. It's about starting and fomenting a revolution up in the Commonwealth, because it turns out that the Commonwealth is a country that was founded by the 8 scribes who designed these rights, but it has gone rotten over the years. It's become authoritarian, it's become kind of religiously fundamental and intolerant, And so the exiles that are thrown down to the downside are some of the most free-thinking people. And you meet a character called Volfred Sandalwood. He's the guy who has kind of brought this group together. He's an Ent-type tree man, a wise old tree. And he wants to foment the revolution, and so he makes you all make a pact that when you go back up to the Commonwealth, the people that go up, they have to meet on the top side with his operatives and try and make a peaceful revolution take place. And this gives the whole game a very different complexion, especially because when you're picking who you're going to send up, you have to pick your highest level players. It's like the players that you've used the most. They're probably the players that you like the most, and they're definitely the players that are your playstyle in the rights. But you also have to choose who goes up, nominate who goes up based on who you think would be good, like up there, to start a revolution. And so that very first friendly character, Hedwyn, the red-headed human who pulls you out of the river, I think pretty much everyone that I've listened to sent him up first, and I did too. And it was really sad to let go of Hedwyn because he felt like the emotional center of the group. And so there is like a really kind of emotional letting go that takes place every time you do a round of the rites and you come back to the liberation arena. You have to pick your favorite players and you have to say goodbye to them. And after they're gone, I mean, it really does hit you a little bit that you have to say bye to these people that you've grown to like in the course of the game. And you'll have some minority characters that you probably use less because they don't appeal to your play style or because you haven't connected with them quite as much. And so you really have to play as everyone. There are moments where the game actually forces you to use the half of your team that you didn't just play. So like your entire team will become fatigued. In the next game, you have to play with the other half of the crew. So it nudges you, well, forces you to play with all of the different characters. So there were times at which I was playing with, I mean, let me just look at this, like this cast of the main characters. There is Hedwyn the human, Jodariel the demon, and Ruki the cur. Those are your three main guys. Then there is Faye the moon-touched child, Sir Gilman, who is a worm knight. He's really fast and nippy, but he doesn't score heavy points. Then you'll have Pamitha. She's a harp, kind of a winged warrior woman, and she can fly over opposition, and she's quite powerful in that way. You'll get a bog witch called Bertrude, who is like this kind of hooded gorgon. She's so cool, and she's got a really sharp, biting wit, and she doesn't take any shit whatsoever. And she's actually an absolute beast on the field as well, especially when you power her up. As your players get more experience in matches, you can pick, like they each have, I think, 8 abilities, and you can pick 4 of them, or 5 of them, I think. And so Bertrude, when she's powered up, she can jump for miles, and so she can just do these monster bog witch dunks across half of the field. And then there is a little imp called Teaser, one of the little drive imps of the Black Wagon, is also like a nippy little player who has these weird abilities. He can bounce around the pitch in a kind of insect style. And I didn't get on with his play style, but I was forced to use him. So you have to kind of let go of your favourite people. I sent up first Hedwyn. I sent them up in the order that I met them, pretty much. I felt like I wanted to send up the people who I'd had the best taste of their backstory and of their voice and character in the story. So I sent up Hedwyn, Jodariel, and Ruki, the 3 that you first find, the crew that makes a pact together to get back to the top side, to the Commonwealth. Then I sent up Faye, and I was really sad to let Faye go because I just really connected with her character. And you have to make some tough choices at the end of the game. And every time you complete a liberation rite, you will, the plan, the big master plan for the revolution, the percentage chance of it happening will shift. And so, like, if I sent up Hedwyn and Jodariel, they both made the success percentage of the plan go up by 10%. And every time you win a match, it goes up by a couple percent. And so I think by the end of the game, I was up in the 80s. And there are different outcomes to the story. This is a game that has, Supergiant have stated that it has millions of outcomes. Because at the end of the game, every single character, whether you sent them up or whether you didn't, whether you won the games or lost them, including your opposition team captains, who are characters in their own right, they all appear in a kind of a giant tableau, and you can click on each of them and find out what your choices mean their outcome was, what their story outcomes were. And there are many, many combinations. Like there are players who will become a couple if you send them up together, or there are very unlikely friendships that will occur, like Pamitha and Bertrude ended up staying downside for me, Bertrude the Witch and Pamitha the Harpy, and they apparently became tight friends in the conclusion I got. From what I've read, there are 3 different outcomes for the revolution. There is a peaceful revolution, which I guess is the good ending. That's not the one that I got because I lost 2 matches. So I lost one liberation right when I was trying to send back Jodariel. And the guy that went up in her place on the opposition team is such an asshole. He's this guy called Lord Manley. He's a very posh aristocrat from the Commonwealth. He was convinced he's going to take up high government office when he gets back, and he has these very retrogressive views. He says horrible things like how many people he's going to send downside, so he'll be sending you all kinds of new friends. He's just a nasty guy. So he went up instead of Jodariel, and I was so mad. I was like, I can't believe that Lord Manley got to go back to the Commonwealth because I lost that game at the last minute. And he even cheated. I was about to win the game, and then he just added 50 to his Pyre, and then they won. I couldn't believe it. I think if I had won that game, I would have got the very good ending. But I got instead a violent revolution led by Hedwyn and Jodariel, and it did result in a change of government and a reform of the Commonwealth. And I looked up the other endings, and there is a revolution that is just if you don't win any of your matches, then there is a very, very violent revolution, and I think it leads to a kind of an anarchic sort of role reversal where the Commonwealth becomes like just a kind of an unstable state, basically. So there are big story endings, 3 different big story endings, and then many, many, many combinations of character endings based on little things that happen in the story and the combinations of people that you send back up. So this game does have a political edge to it as well, alongside everything else that I've talked about: the religion, the law, the backstory, the scribes, the empire, the Commonwealth. It even has politics in it. It's about a tolerant society and trying to create one, trying to maintain one, and pushing back against a society that has gone wrong. And so I really enjoyed Pyre. It's a very vivid experience. I've never played a game quite like it. The visual novels that I've played have not had this level of playability and gameplay. And I mean, there is no sports game that has this much plot attached to it. And just as a high fantasy game containing sports, visual novel, and RPG elements, it's a complete one-off. I would say it's maybe my favourite Supergiant game, including Hades and Transistor. So, I think it's not going to be everyone's. A lot of people are going to gravitate to the fast and furious gameplay of Hades or the more story-led tactical gameplay of Transistor. But for me, Pyre is just such an eccentric ball of stimulating, beautiful creativity that it's just the one for me. That's Pyre. And so I went from using Pyre as a game to get myself out of the Hades addiction and the kind of like what can follow Hades feeling, to being post-Pyre and thinking, what can follow Pyre? These Supergiant Games, man, they're just too good. And so I kind of searched around for something else to pick up. I tried out a few things. I tried out a little bit of Titanfall 2, but it was a little too kind of military, Call of Duty-ish for me, a bit too FPS. Not really my taste. I'll come back to it, but I didn't really feel like just kind of being a space marine. I tried out because Doom Eternal is on sale currently, and it's getting all these Game of the Year nominations, so I thought, I wonder if I would be into Doom. It's been so long since I played a Doom game. I played the original Doom way back on, I can't even remember what console, Super Nintendo maybe? But I tried out Doom 2016 because it's on PlayStation Plus, and I thought, well, if I have a taste for that, maybe I'll have a taste for Doom Eternal. But it was just way too much for me, way too violent, way too fast and furious and visceral, just kind of horrible. Not my taste. So I played a little bit of Soma, which is a game that a lot of people have been recommending to me. It's a horror game. It's a sci-fi horror. but there is like a safe mode that you can play on. So I think I'm going to stick with that one a little bit. It's very creepy. It's like an abandoned space station game where something weird has happened and there's creatures stalking the halls. But I'm into it, so I think I might continue with Soma. Or if I decide to get cold feet on all of this kind of horror game and blood and guts stuff, I might go back to Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, which I've started on Switch and I'm really enjoying. There's a whole bunch of Black Friday sales as well. I noticed that Ghost of Tsushima is on sale, but it's still £40. I'm not sure if I want to splash out that much cash on it. I'm kind of curious to play it, but it hasn't really won my heart, that game. So I kind of want to pay £25 for it or get it on PS Plus or something, which is probably, 4 or 5 months away, I guess, that kind of price for that game. But I think I will play Ghost of Tsushima at some point. I do like open world games. I do like pretty exploration games. I will definitely get to that one. So yeah, that's been my week of gaming. I hope that you enjoyed that episode. I've been having a really good time on Twitter in the last couple of weeks. There's just been a really busy conversation going on. All kinds of end of year lists coming up and things like that. Lots of people just considering the year in games that they had. I've been doing the one finish a week challenge and I'm on number 90, I think. I think Pyre was number 90 for me. That's more games that I've completed this year than probably the rest of my life combined. And I really wanted to try and get to 100 before the year ends, but that's just 4 or 5 weeks away now. Wow, 2020 is coming to its close. So if you have any game recommendations for me, or if you want to tell me what you've been playing, then please do look me up on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube as Gaming in the Wild. Patreon is there too, if you'd like to support the show. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be back next week with a new episode. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay safe. Wear a mask. Wash your hands. If you're American, then happy Thanksgiving. If you're European, then I don't know, have a good sandwich in solidarity or something. Okay, take care, guys. Bye-bye.